Hey guys, it's me, Aaron. I'm here with Mike Conte. Mike is a guest of ours at Olympia today. He's from Williamsville North High School, and one of the things I think is really cool is that Williamsville North, Williamsville Central School District, and the Greece Central Schools are pretty close in terms of population. They've got three big high schools, right?
Yep.
And we said, what, five middle schools?
Yep.
So kind of right along our same lines. Definitely the demographics are different for them, but there's still a lot in common that I think we can talk about. And so Mike was also my high school band teacher and also a high school classmate of Kimberly Ronan.
Yes.
Which is kind of cool. So there's some connections here. And Mike's going to conduct on our wind ensemble concert tonight. But I thought we could get together, and then I think I probably just didn't give people enough notice. So we're just going to do it this way instead. So we're recording this, and then I think what I'll just be able to do is send it out to everybody, and you guys can. Well, you're obviously watching it right now, so you figured it out. Anyways. The goal for today is basically I went through all the things that you guys wrote and said as far as concerns, what are the things we need to work on, and it's no surprise that a lot of those were the same. A lot of people had the same opinion. And so some of them are things that I don't think that Mike can really help us very much with in terms of like some of the staffing things. That's kind of another story, but in terms of how we work together as teachers and how we work as a department, I think he's got a lot of great insight. So, first of all, at your school, are you you have some kind of leadership role within the music department?
Myself?
Yeah.
We actually kind of share the leadership role just for our school in that we've got a person who oversees all the music and the arts for the entire district, along with some other subject areas. So there's someone at district office who oversees the larger unit. But the way that it's worked, at least at North High School, is just the relationship that I have with our administration, that a lot of times they come through me as well as the orchestra director, Mr. Buckle, Joe Buckle, who's been there quite a few years, to try to disseminate information and or get feedback.
So in a district your size, then how do you guys make connections like with your feeder program? We talked a little bit last night, and you said kind of two middle schools seem to send their kids your way.
Right. The way that it works is that each school has almost a dedicated middle school that the majority of those students, and I would say almost 90% of those students, come to that school.
That's real close to what we have.
Right, exactly. And I have my middle school, or my two middle schools feed our high school. We're the only one that has two that the majority feed. Now I say that, still about 80 to 90%, maybe closer to 90, do go to another high school than ours, but the majority, and it has to do with the districting lines. Mm-hmm. So I'm the only school that has two middle schools that feed us for the
But you can pretty well go to those two middle schools and have a pretty decent idea of what your band might look like in a few years.
Completely. Okay. In fact, we just did that in January. My colleague and I, Michael Vertosky, go down and we listen to every single 8th grader, whether they're coming to North or not.
And when do you do this?
We do this actually during our January high school exams. We have permission from our administrators, instead of having during the midterms all the teachers have to proctor. Mm-hmm. And instead of proctoring, because this is better for the kids and it's better for the program, they count that as our proctor.
Nice.
So we spend one day at each middle school and we listen to every 8th grader. Even if they're not going to the school, we still have them play. Sometimes they ask us why, and we said, if for some reason you're to go to a different high school, many of them that aren't going will either go to one of those other high schools or a private school. If you come back, I at least have a paper trail, and I can say a year ago you were playing this at this level. Where are you now? So, and honestly, we have a handful of kids that do come back, or they didn't like where they went, so they do come back. So at least I have a little bit of information on them, as opposed to completely losing track of them and having to start from ground zero.
And what do they play? Do you have a unified sort of etude, or do you just have them play whatever?
We've tried a bunch of different things. We've done anything from an etude that, again, Mike Vertosky and I have created for them. The problem we sometimes have is that our feeder middle schools have their own curriculum that they like to follow.
Okay.
And this is just one more thing that sometimes just makes it tougher for them to prepare the kids. So what we decided is, a month earlier, we tell them, and we come and visit, and we say, we're going to ask you 3 scales out of all the scales that you know, and we're going to ask you for an exercise that you left off in your method book. So then the teacher doesn't have to upset their curriculum. It's wherever they left off. The teacher knows that, and they tell them, all right, this is probably the one they're going to ask. Mm-hmm. unless they're playing solo for our county festival, which is also in January, they're welcome to play a portion of their county festival solo in lieu of the method book, which is usually a little bit more difficult than the method book, which is fine. And we only ask for about 4 or 5 lines.
So it's whatever they're working on. Basically.
Whatever they're working on.
Now, is there some kind of unified book or series of books that people use?
That's really great to go backward just a little bit. You had talked about communication in the feeder program. No, that's okay. So what we started, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, is we call it the North Side, and this is just for the band, but we're talking elementary, middle, and high. We get all the band directors together. We try to make it regularly. We were better before, but at least 2 to 3 times a year. And we meet at one of our schools, usually a middle school because they let out later, and we talk about anything from equipment. In fact, the last conversation we had was about equipment, just everybody coming up with an agreement on this is the mouthpiece and the reeds that we're going to ask kids to have for clarinet players. We have someone who's a woodwind specialist on staff, so we ask them, what do you recommend? And this is what she recommends. Well, she's the professional, and we talk about it, and we all come to agreement, and there's our consensus. We're now going with this. We have someone who, we actually have 3 brass players on staff, so they might ask me, okay, trombone mouthpieces, this is what I recommend. Mm-hmm. Now we have no tuba professional on staff, but with the 3 brass players, we all talk it through, and everybody kind of chimes in until we all come to a consensus. This is the tuba mouthpiece, etc., etc. Right. We also talk about syllabus as far as books. What method books are we using? And we all come into agreement with it would be best if we followed this series. There was a great clinic that I just saw this past fall from Marty Allen and the Grand Island Music Department.
Right, I was there.
That's right, you were there. Talking about method books, and he made such a great point, which, by the way, if you don't know the Grand Island band program and music department on a whole, but specifically the band program, which I know very well, they're outstanding. They're outstanding from elementary. Those are some of the best elementary teachers I have ever seen who are there right now, all the way up through. It's very, very impressive what they do. And they really say a lot of it has to do with their series of method books they use. The thing they drove home was the biggest mistake we all make, and I am guilty of making the same mistake. We get to a point in the method book, it turns into summer. We have brand new lesson groups. You might have a new group of kids coming in, and we start a brand new method book again, never getting through that other method book just so that we start everybody fresh. Mm-hmm. The problem with that, and this is a great suggestion, if you do only the first half of a method book, there's only a certain set of keys and or rhythmic difficulty that you're reinforcing year after year. It could be a different publisher, it could be a different book, but they're usually the same set of keys. If you finish the entire series, the entire book, you're going to be a more well-rounded individual player. So what they really kind of brought home was that you need to find a way to supplement until you get everybody going so you can complete a book. Yeah. So a bunch of us saw that and we said, that makes a lot of sense. We met and we came to the consensus that the way we're starting seems to be pretty good. Our elementaries really seem to like the Essential Elements book, and then it goes into the 2 Breeze Easies, mm-hmm. which then are also interspersed with the student instrumental course, which I like a lot. And that's starting with the Green Book, which is the beginning. Then they go into the middle school. At middle school, they're usually trying to go finish up the Breeze Easies and maybe going from the green to the second level, which is the Orange Book, again of the student instrumental series. By the time they come to high school, we're usually somewhere around the end of Breeze Easy to somewhere in the middle of that student series book, and then our goal is to try to finish that book up and then get into the 3rd level. And right now, we've just been kind of working on that, but that's our plan.
That's great. And so you already know what they're going to be playing when you go to that middle
Well,
school,
you hope that, again, the hardest part, and I have a senior who has a situation where he was in a more advanced euphonium group, and I had to tell him, I said, listen, we're going to go back about 5 pages, 6 pages. We have to catch these other people up to you, and then we'll move forward. And it was the level 2 student instrumental course. Here's the thing. You might have been able to play that really, really well, let's just say last spring. It's amazing to me that when I had this young man do this, and he didn't complain, he said, okay, fine. Even with the limited amount of practicing he may have been doing, it still wasn't as perfect as you would have thought.
Right.
So it was extremely beneficial for him to go back, and I think a lot of us have done that. We've, reviewed pages in books and solos and such through our musical careers, and it does not hurt to review things.
He had it checked off.
Exactly. Just because it's checked off doesn't mean it was done and it was done right.
Cool. So, I mean, your district, just based on what I've observed and growing up and everything, always super high quality performers, especially by the time they get to that high school level. And I'm sure that a lot of that has to do with the people who are teaching them. How do you encourage high expectations from all your colleagues, and how does that work? Like, so you make sure everybody's, pulling their weight, so to speak.
That's the $1 million question.
Sure.
I wish I had an easy answer to that, because I think no matter, this is the fourth high school I've taught at. So I've taught at a very rural district, which was a 60-person graduating class. I've taught at a semi-rural district, and then I've taught at the two suburbs, Orchard Park and now Williamsville North. Finding and teaching in those areas, it's always the same issue, making sure that everybody in the chain or the feeder system or program is all on the same level as far as what we want people to accomplish. I think the only way to get people to come close to that is to be in front of each other on a regular basis to kind of talk about things like that, expectations. And it could be something as easy as, what are we expecting kids to know scale-wise? And just so we're all in agreement, by the end of this grade, we should. Now, the big problem is, I don't know if I can make kids learn X amount of scales by 8th grade. Okay, well, it's not going to be every kid, but that's your goal.
Right.
Some kids might know more, some kids might know less, but our goal is to get the majority of kids to know this many scales. And when I say proficient, it means not play it once, but play it multiple times. Yeah. With that being said, you can also take that same information and talk about, level of music. You can talk about kinds of music. The other thing that seems very beneficial is we're very good in that North feeder system of going to each other's concerts. Oh, cool. And we work really, really hard to make sure that, I don't expect everyone to come to every single one of my concerts, and I try really hard to make all of my feeder system concerts. Does two things. First off, it's right to support your colleagues. Second off, is that the kids see you. Right. If bridging those gaps, this is one of our issues, bridging the gap between elementary school to middle school, and then middle school to high school seems to be where we run into the biggest attritions.
Right, sure.
So we've made a concerted effort in the last 4 years to make sure that we're at each other's concerts so the kids see us. I could walk into any of my feeder middle schools right now, today, with you, and the people at the front desk know who I am. The kids in the hall, I might not know every single kid because they're not my students yet, but because I've been there and on site, they'll say, oh, hi, Mr. Conte, and Mr. Vertowski's with you. I say, hi, Mr. Vertowski. So we'll get that just walking down the hall, which is what we want. So they feel a little bit more comfortable when they do make that transition. Yeah. Eventually what would be really great, and we're not to that point yet for my program, but it would be great if we could, during one of these meetings, talk about our program and get feedback. What did you think about my pieces? What did you think about my band? We're always very complimentary. We're always there to help each other, but it takes a certain amount of confidence to kind of talk about that. Sure. I have to be very honest. I don't know if we're there yet. I am with my direct colleagues. I have no issues in asking him, what they've really thought about it. The ones that are in the high school, and they can be very, very blunt, and that's okay. That's kind of what I need. We're also something else that we've started a couple of years ago. When one of our feeder system people, again, has to be gone and needs a sub, if they know enough in advance and can ask us, we can come over and we can work with their group, which is great. And the middle school has started doing that with the elementary school so that we could, again, be in front of the students and we can kind of learn what's happening and that we can work with each other.
You mentioned a couple of times like these get-togethers or meetings or whatever. Do those happen in place of other school? Like for us, the way our stuff works is that you're expected to do like a meeting a week. Okay. It can vary in terms of what that meeting is. And some schools do like a school-wide 1 week and a department the next, or the elementary schools do it differently, and all right. Depends. But you're definitely expected to do one a week. That's part of the contract. Okay. So are those in addition to some of those responsibilities, or do you get paid more for it, or is there any kind of just voluntary?
Right now it's 100% voluntary. We did it because we wanted the program to get better. I have to be very honest. It was myself and a couple of the other directors in the feeder system that initiated it. We said, we never get together enough, and we're busy, and we get it. And it's again, it's tough, but it's always well worth it. We've talked about there is a possibility of us putting in for the hours and being remunerated for the hours. We did attempt it one year, and everything was going through well. But you have to show that you've done it for a year for them to be. It's a very long process, and honestly, we didn't follow through with it on the second year. We still get together, and I hate to say it, it's not part of the contract. It should be, because I think it's very healthy. And right now, it's 100% voluntary.
Do you get buy-in from everybody, or?
Yeah, right now we do.
Great.
We do. There are times that, I can't be there. We try to get feedback from everyone, but everyone is willing to, because we're all working together for the common good. The way that we started it when we first began a few years ago was, as I told you before, we have all these teachers that have our specialty instruments. We have a bassoon player who's on staff. We have the brass players that I told you about.
Now, pause for a second. So when you say that bassoon player is a teacher at one of the schools,
our elementary
his job's
teacher.
not just to come and play bassoon.
No,
right?
no. Yeah, it's our elementary band director. She works at 2 different schools that feed our middle schools. Then we have a flute professional who's our 5th, 6th band director. We have a percussionist who is part-time at each of our 2 middle schools. So what we did is we got together and said everybody presents on their instrument to our small group. And it's basically a master class, and it was anything from tips on how to fix things or common mistakes to reed choice, instrument choice, basically a clinic that you would do at any county level or state level, again, but only to our group. And it was great because by the time you left, you had a list of supplementary material, recommendations. It could be anything from fingerings, alternate fingerings for a clarinet, to trill fingerings for a flute, to exercises. My favorite part was the exercises and warm-ups that these professionals recommend us do to make the students better. Some of them I knew, some of them I didn't, but I employed it all. That was a great chance for all of us to give our professional opinion on our specific instrument, or an instrument that we're well trained in, and then now hopefully we're all employing that same information, and now we have a consistent kind of teaching method all the way from elementary up to high school.
That's great. That's cool. A lot of good ideas there. A lot of stuff that I think we've done a little bit of, but that's great stuff. We were talking before we started the recording about inventory and about instruments that our school owned, and I think that in the notes it looks like we had several people who talked about either not having the instrument that they need, or how to get the instrumentation that they would hope for, and I think that people work hard at that, but some of the ideas you were talking about were pretty kind of interesting in terms of what you saw at a neighboring school district. And this idea of kind of controlling the instrumentation. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
For us, we own some of the more specialty instruments. When I say that, so we own our bass clarinets, the students. We don't have any students that own their own bass clarinet. We own the bassoons. We own the oboes. We own the French horns, the euphoniums. So when the students use the school instruments, they get a school instrument and they can use it obviously in school, and they can take it home as well. They do pay a fee. It's significantly minuscule compared to normal rental fee. I think it's $80 for an entire year, which incorporates the summer as well, which compared to some of the music stores is pretty inexpensive, and we take care of the repairs. With that being said, many times, and I'll just use bass clarinet because I think that was the first instrument I said, and there's usually a small number of people, and we have done this before. If there's a student that, obviously they're using a school instrument, we're providing a school instrument for them at a significantly discounted rate, and they're not playing to the level of proficiency that they should be. What we'll end up doing sometimes is telling them and contacting home and saying that we're not hearing that your child is performing to the ability level that is expected specifically on this instrument. We have other people who would love to use this instrument, who are waiting to use the instrument. We need this person in the next X amount of time, let's just say it's half a marking period, 5 weeks, to show us a marked improvement, or we're going to have to say that we're going to need to ask for the instrument back, refund you whatever prorated money you have, and we're going to pass the instrument on to someone else. You can then go out to a music store and get an instrument if you need. I will be very honest. I know I personally have done that twice with a student. Funny enough, one of them was a bass clarinet player, and the student, the parents were involved, obviously, and said, well, we don't want to lose that bass clarinet to somebody else. We really want our daughter to practice, and so you get that home support when you start. And I'd say it's a threat. I don't think it's a threat. It's just if there's someone else who has the opportunity to maybe flourish on that instrument more, and maybe this person is not interested in that instrument anymore. Now what we can do.
Not sure. Still going?
Is it?
Yeah, it looks like it might still be going. Let's just stop here and we'll restart.